Okay, so we are live. How about that? Hi, everybody. This is Steve Sabludowsky, publisher of BayouBuzz.com. And today, I think we're going to be doing something really awesome. We're streaming to thousands of people at once on Facebook, Twitter. We're going to be talking about the Louisiana coast with Congressman Garret of Baton Rouge, who plays a really important role up in Congress on the special committee. And we have Jimmy Frederick, Communications Director of the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana. Jimmy's going to be our moderator. Good afternoon, Jimmy. How are you doing today?
Steve, thanks so much for having it. Really appreciate it, and really appreciate what BayouBuzz.com is doing for us. Of course, we're live on CRCL's Facebook page. We're also live on Restore the Mississippi River Deltas page, and thousands of people are watching. And I want to encourage everyone to please send in your comments, send in your questions for Congressman Garret Graves. And we are trying to keep the discussion to coastal restoration, to our coast. With all the things going on in Washington, we could ask Congressman Garret Graves 1,000 questions about 1,000 different things, but we're going to try to keep things going pretty close to the coast here for just a bit. And please share and like the event. I don't want to waste too much time because I know you don't have much time, Congressman, but I want to just really quickly introduce you a little bit to our audience. And of course, you're the 6th District Congressman. That encompasses 13 parishes from north of Baton Rouge all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. And you sit on the House Committee of Transportation and Infrastructure and Natural Resources, and you chair the subcommittee on Water Resources and Environment, and of course the former chairman of the Coastal Protection and Restoration Authority under Governor under Governor Bobby Jindal, and also a classmate of mine back at Our Lady of Mercy and Catholic High, and go Bears, right?
That's a great championship game.
Hey, listen, really appreciate you being here. Before we get into some of the coast stuff, I do want to say, I think there's an opportunity for some congratulations on H.R. 200 that passed the Natural Resources Committee. It has a lot of your language in it from the Modern Fish Act that you have proposed earlier in April. Just wanted to get an idea of what that means for anglers in Louisiana.
Well, you know, it's really interesting, Jimmy. When you look at the number of fishers in the Gulf of Mexico as compared to the West Coast as compared to the East Coast, even Alaska. The state of Alaska has less than 1 million fishing trips a year. The West Coast with Washington, Oregon, California, the huge population densities they have there, they have around 5.5 million trips a year. Gulf of Mexico, over 20 million. Wow. So just the recreational fishing participation we have in the Gulf, the bounty of the Gulf of Mexico, largely related to the production of our coastal ecosystem in the state of Louisiana. It's really extraordinary. So a lot of people partake in that. And it's an extraordinarily different demand level. And so what this bill does is it helps to ensure that proper balance with recreational fishing, commercial fishing, charter, and importantly uses the best science to ensure we have sustainable fisheries moving forward for generations.
And that really is the key term for us here in Louisiana is best science. Our blueprint, our coastal master plan, which you were a major part of the first one, and of course, subsequent ones after that. But Louisiana is really leading in coastal restoration, not just in our area, but in the world. And that is pretty special.
It is. And unfortunately, as we all know, Louisiana Cajun gets rated number one in different criteria. And usually that's, or I would say sometimes, being number one is not where you want to be, meaning the worst in things in some instances. This is a situation where Louisiana is absolutely a national leader, the national leader in sustainable coastal ecosystems, sustainable coastal communities. Other countries, other states come to the state of Louisiana and ask us for guidance, for advice. And the Coastal Master Plan, or master plans that have been done, of course, the latest one this year, are really on the edge of integrating science, technology, and policy. It's something we should all be proud of.
The cornerstones for those master plans are large-scale sediment diversions. We're closer than ever. CRCL has been calling for those sediment diversions since 1989. Just a year after we were formed, we're going to be celebrating our 30th anniversary coming up in January. Pretty excited about that. Mm-hmm. But the point is that it's a very complex permitting process. And I guess the question for you at the federal level is there anything we can do to kind of help speed that up? I know this is not the first time you've heard that question.
Yeah. Laws that are in place today, things like the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the National Environmental Policy Act, wetlands regulations related to Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. Those laws largely came into place in the 1970s and beyond. Had those laws been in place back when the Corps of Engineers was building levees on our river system, we probably wouldn't be in the predicament we're in today, where we've lost nearly 2,000 square miles of our coast. So these same laws that actually would have helped to protect our coast in the 1930s when these levees are built, today, in many cases, they're actually impeding our ability to move forward. The National Environmental Policy Act, we're studying the impacts to the environment of restoring the environment, restoring the coast. These projects are designed to benefit the environment, to benefit ecological productivity, to benefit fisheries and birds and other things that are so important to the sportsman's paradise. And during the time it's taking us to go through these studies and evaluations, we're losing more of the coast. Same thing with Marine Mammal Protection Act, same thing in some cases with essential fish habitat, where National Marine Fisheries Service is saying that areas that are now open water but years ago were land, we now have to give deference to the fish. It's like, well, wait a minute. Why are we mitigating for the fish when the fish didn't mitigate for the people in our lands? So trying to work through these laws to make sure that they're working in an effective manner to truly benefit the environment, not to get in the way of projects designed to restore our coast and our communities in South Louisiana.
Is there anything that we as citizens can do? I mean, is there anything that would help get that message across?
You know, Jimmy, I think that in many cases when you talk about touching environmental laws, things like the National Environmental Policy Act, the Endangered Species Act, a lot of these laws are considered to be the holy grail, sacrosanct. You can't touch them. If a Republican talks about touching them, it's only to take away environmental protections. If a Democrat talks about touching them, it's only to make it harder to do things. And the reality is there's nothing political about this. It's what's in the best interest of South Louisiana, the best interest of this country. And I think educating people and helping them to understand that. And I say people, I mean members of Congress, helping them to understand, helping federal agencies to understand that this isn't some partisan deal designed to injure the environment or endangered species or others. This is in the best interest of the country, and it's about advancing efforts to restore our coast and make Louisiana more resilient and sustainable.
Well, you mentioned the Endangered Species Act, and I just want to know how close the Cajuns are actually being put on that list. I thought that was a beautiful way to put it on the floor of Congress, on the floor of the House of Representatives.
Yeah, you know, we have been doing a lot of work, and Stephen, I don't know if we talked about this, but we've been doing a lot of work on the Endangered Species Act and just looking at ways to apply more common sense to it. And the more I looked at it, I said, gosh, if we can deem ourselves as endangered species, we'll get all these protections. The federal government will come in and help us to restore the coast, as opposed to fighting our efforts to restore the coast and protect our communities in South Louisiana. So I did propose an amendment to deem Cajuns as endangered species, so the federal government would protect us as well. Today I threatened to deem Cajuns fish, so we could get essential fish habitat protection. But you know, as comical as that is, it did bring a lot of attention and just sort of a different perspective to some of these laws, and helping folks understand that we can't forget about people, about the community, whenever we're considering or applying these laws.
One of the interesting things about this issue, especially in Louisiana, is that you've already mentioned it's not a partisan issue, but it's also not environment versus economy. And that is something I'm not so sure that the rest of the country understands. We understand the symbiotic relationship we have here in Louisiana. And that's why it's got to be saved. I would imagine that's something you try to talk about a lot.
We do. And Jimmy, you're exactly right. And people have tried to make this a partisan issue over the years. And thankfully, our delegation, our state, and many others have resisted that temptation to do so. You know, if you go back to perhaps before Hurricane Katrina, there were just a handful of us that were out there talking about the coast, and decades before that, you had even fewer, just a small handful of people. But largely before Katrina, it was considered an environmental issue. It was the tree huggers that were out there talking about the coast. Katrina, I think, was that pivotal moment where people realized, oh, wow, this isn't a birds and fish problem. It's not a habitat problem. This is something that affects every socioeconomic class, every race, every neighborhood, every coastal parish. And it really, I think that Hurricane Katrina, Hurricane Rita caused sort of that transcending event that really made people realize this is not about the environment. This is about everything that's great about South Louisiana. It's about my home, my business, my economy, the place I like to fish, and many other things. It's just a pervasive issue. And I think that was the turning point. And I'll say it again, thankfully, we've been able to, and especially in these uber partisan times we're seeing today, we've been able to resist temptations to make this a partisan issue. Republicans, Democrats, Independents, everyone we've all been working together to advance the restoration efforts and protection efforts in the state of Louisiana.
And the more I talk with you and others and realize how important Louisiana is, not just to Louisiana, but to the country, and all the energy production, the fact that we, everything we do. I mean, when you think about how important Louisiana is, it's got to be something that is kind of hard to get through some of the minds of some of the people you deal with on a daily basis. How important Louisiana is.
And Jimmy, one of the things about being up here in Congress, obviously you have all 50 states represented, you have the different territories represented, and so I hate to say that there's a comparison or a battle or a competition, but oftentimes you'll be sitting in meetings and people will say, oh well, yeah, and pick a state, and in Nebraska we do this, and this, and I'm sitting there in Nebraska, gosh, we're about 20 times that, just right. Louisiana is a gold mine, and it almost takes a situation like this where you have this comparison and contrast to all these other states to recognize really what an asset we have in the state of Louisiana. The natural resources are amazing. Of course, the river system, the infrastructure we have related to transportation. I mean, just really some incredible assets we have in the state.
I know you might be having to get to a vote, but I want to try to get a few other things in, so I understand completely if you got to run. But I know I got a good deal. Just talking about a lot of other people around the country, especially coastal communities, are realizing that things are changing for them. And with the limited federal dollars that actually exist and will exist into the future, how does Louisiana leverage what we've already done to make sure that that we're not the forgotten? And I'm going to come back to GOMESA in just a second. I don't want to forget about that.
Wait, I want to make sure I understand the question. How do we leverage what we've done?
Well, I guess what I'm going to trying to get at is the fact that we've been doing this for a long time. Well, we've been doing this for 20 or 30 years now. And now we're getting to a point where a lot of other people are having to do the same things that we are. And the funding, I guess it's all about funding. It's all about funding. And the unfortunate thing is the oil spill was a terrible thing. But if we hadn't had it, we wouldn't have the funding stream that we have now. So we'd be in a much worse spot.
Okay, got it. I understand now. So number one, years ago when I was working for the state of Louisiana, we had literally pulled together tens of billions of dollars in funding. And one of the things that I recognized is, as you've indicated, we are on the edge of this. We're the canary in the coal mine in regard to what we're doing in South Louisiana. It's a scenario that other states and territories and countries will be experiencing in the future. We're on the edge of this, unfortunately, because of our extraordinary subsidence rates, our sinking rates, and in addition to the sea rise. We're the canary in the coal mine. So what we did is we established the Water Institute of the Gulf, and the idea was we needed to have an independent entity that could be our science, coastal science and resilience guru, our center of excellence. And so we created that Water Institute. I'm not sure if you've seen those amazing new buildings popping up just on the downriver side of the Mississippi River Bridge in Baton Rouge.
We're moving there.
Well, that's right. You are in the water campus, in the Water Institute building. I checked out your digs the other day. But having a physical center of excellence where you integrate government and academia and the private sector, not-for-profit expertise, all in one location. The Netherlands ran into a somewhat comparable situation decades and decades ago. They have Deltares, they have the Rich Waterstaff, their Corps of Engineers equivalent. We need to make sure that we're learning from the mistakes we made and learning from the successes, and we're building upon those. We're exporting those to other states, to other countries. So that's one thing that we're doing. But in addition to that, we are continuing to work to educate other members of Congress, other policymakers, departments. We just had the Secretary of the United States Department of Interior, Ryan Zinke, down in Louisiana about 2 weekends ago. Took him out to our coast, to Davis Pond, had him meet with community leaders and business leaders and political leaders and others talking about the national repercussions of our coast. And so I think it's going to take that sustained education effort, the sustained trips down to Louisiana, and I think the continued active involvement and expertise of the Water Institute, the Coalition, and others to ensure the rest of the nation that the things we're doing with these dollars are responsible, they're based upon best science, and they're truly investments, not pork spending, meaning that this isn't just spending, this is investments that generate a return in cost savings, ecological productivity, and resilient communities.
Going back to sticking with funding a little bit, one of the things that we have put together along with our partners at the Mississippi River, Restore the Mississippi River Delta, is our 17 major priority projects. You've probably seen those, and some of those are sitting idle right now because there is no funding. Is there anything on the horizon that might change that?
Well, so one of the things we're working on, and actually started working on about a year ago, you might have heard the president talk about this infrastructure package. And usually the term infrastructure brings visions of roads and bridges, which certainly in Louisiana we are in need of. Bridge across the Mississippi River for one. But what we did is we began engaging the then Trump campaign and since then the White House, talking to them about what infrastructure really needs. Roads and bridges, absolutely, but it's not relegated to that. Things like, and this is sort of the way that we had sequenced it, we said, well, look, why don't we start with roads and bridges, and then we'll start talking about navigation dredging. And the reason for that very quickly is that the Panama Canal is now wider and deeper. It can facilitate vessels that do not fit in the Mississippi River. We have 5 of the top 15 ports in the nation. We need to maintain that maritime industry. But here was the thought process. If we can get them to realize that ports and river dredging is an important part of infrastructure and trade in our economy, then when we dredge those navigation channels, we have what? Sediment. Well, then we naturally cascade into the next thing. Well, hey, Mr. President, now that we have this sediment, we have some ideas of what we can do with it. We can use it to restore the coast. And so we kind of went through this progression with White House officials and the campaign at the time, talking to them about this. And so we've had very good discussions about what infrastructure is. Infrastructure is roads and bridges. Infrastructure is ports and dredging and navigation channels to maintain these, the Port of Baton Rouge, the Port of South Louisiana, Port of New Orleans, and other ports in our state that are major job creators. But it's also about restoring our coast and resilient communities and sustainable ecosystems, because, Jimmy, those are cost-effective investments. I mean, do we really even need to people in Louisiana understand this, but people in Texas, I think with Hurricane Harvey, the impacts of Hurricane Maria and Irma in Florida, in Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, time after time after time, we could have spent a fraction of the money on the front end making these areas more resilient versus spending absurd amounts of money on the back end. And just to throw out a dollar figure, since 1980, over $1.3 trillion spent on responding to disasters. A fraction of that money invested in proactive, principled restoration projects, levees, and others would have saved exponential dollars.
Just to remind everybody, we're talking to 6th District Congressman Garret Graves from Louisiana. Stephen, do we have any comments or questions? I meant to ask you a little bit earlier.
Sure. Thank you very much. I'm actually going to read one. This is from Stephen L. Simpson, pardon me. It's a comment, but I thought it was really interesting. It says the Ouachita River and aquifer is the most polluted in the world per capita. All about South Louisiana, none for us at all. We are turned down in the north of Louisiana. I just thought it was a really interesting comment. In any response?
Wait, so he's saying that the aquifer in North Louisiana is polluted and they're not getting any?
Yeah, so what he's saying is that the Ouachita River and aquifer is the worst per capita. And he says, look, this is all about South Louisiana and that we're not getting anything out of this in North Louisiana.
Well, look, the reality is, as Jimmy can tell you, what we're doing in South Louisiana today in regard to the coast affects the entire state of Louisiana. You can look only at Hurricane Katrina as a perfect example, where roughly $150 billion was spent. Much of the economy in the state was frozen at the time. What affects the coast affects everyone in the state of Louisiana. These investments benefit the entire state. If there's specific issues regarding contaminated aquifers and others, I'd be happy to work together with Congressman Johnson, Congressman Abraham, and see what we can do working together with Corps of Engineers, EPA, and others. But I'm not sure if that was the Chico Aquifer. You have the Ouachita River. I'd be happy to get more information and see what we can do to help out.
Sure, that's the major point that he was making. By the way, Jimmy, I just want to repeat, and that is those people who are watching, please share, please like. We certainly would love to have as many people hear from the congressman. Go ahead, Jimmy. Thank you.
No, and I think that brings the point to bear right there, is that if we can't make or help folks in northern Louisiana understand how important coastal Louisiana is, it's going to be very difficult to do the same thing with Nebraska or some other state.
It is a good point. I know the coalition, I know LSU, and many other folks, including this state federal QIPRA program. They run a number of education efforts. In fact, I know the coalition does some volunteer efforts. That while it's great that you bring volunteers, based on my participation in those end up yielding extraordinary education benefits by helping people to understand what exactly is going on with the coast and how it does affect everyone. But you bring up an excellent point. If our own citizens don't understand what is happening, understand what's at stake, then certainly we can't expect folks from Arkansas, New York, California, or elsewhere to really get it. But not to say that the issue that was brought up is not important, but certainly what's going on with the coast is one of the most pervasive things, and I think one of the biggest threats to the future of our state.
I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act, GOMESA, and the fact that we were planning on about twice as much money as where it looks like we're going to be getting. Can you give us an update on what's going on there? And maybe also, why is it continuously on the chopping block?
Yeah. So the Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act, or GOMESA, is a law that was enacted in December of 2006. I actually was doing a little bit of staff work up here at the time and was one of the authors and negotiators of that act, and it took us a number of years to get there. And so what it did is basically for the first roughly 10 years, it had a very small revenue sharing component where the state of Louisiana and our coastal parishes would receive a small percentage of revenues related to offshore energy production. Then effectively this year is when we were supposed to see this large jump in dollars, and the estimates ranged anywhere from $120 to $150 million. Jimmy, what happened is in 2015 and 2016, first of all, there were efforts by the previous president to cut this program, to eliminate the program altogether very quickly. This current president actually kept that same proposal in his budget and tried to cut it as well. Thankfully, we were able to our congressional delegation was able to fight that back and win in the past 2 years. We're currently having the battle now. We've won it so far in the House, and now that battle's in the Senate. But here's what I think. It was a hard-fought battle to get this bill enacted in 2006. It probably took about 10 years, which was on the shoulders or preceded by probably 5 or 6 other efforts over a 20 or 30-year period before that to try and get this done. So lots of blood, sweat, and tears in this whole thing. Before the money actually starts flowing in a bigger way this year, I think that previous bean counters within the federal government thought, hey, here's a good way to cut spending. Let's stop this from ever happening. That way the money doesn't ever come, and we don't have people that are expecting the revenue on an annual basis. Obviously, I think that's penny wound. Let me try that again. I think that's penny wise and pound foolish. As we've talked about, whether it's Katrina, Rita, Gustav, Ike, Isaac, Tropical Storm Allison, many, many others, we end up spending significantly more dollars responding to disasters rather than being proactive. This is an opportunity under the state's constitution, with the citizens of our Louisiana overwhelmingly approved an amendment that ensures that these dollars go toward restoration, protection, and very tightly confined uses that are tied to our coastal master plan and resilience. So principled spending that yields cost savings. So I think it largely is a lack of understanding or knowledge. I wasn't as surprised when it was proposed 2 years back that this was on the cutting block. I was surprised when it was in the budget this year as to be cut. So we immediately went and set up a Gulf Coast delegation meeting with the Secretary of the Interior, with the Office of Management and Budget, to educate them on this. And the trip that we just had down in Louisiana with Secretary Zinke, I think, helps to put the exclamation point on the importance of the program. And I think we have some more advocates that are on board now, but we need to remain vigilant, of course, to ensure that this doesn't continue to be proposed for cuts.
Listen, I know we only have a couple of minutes left with you, but I wanted to ask you about some of the other things that you are working on, especially the infrastructure and the recovery bills that you're really working on, because we've had so many natural disasters, not just here in Louisiana, but across the country. And what you're doing is doing some really major work up there.
Well, we had a really, and I'm maybe a disaster nerd, but we had a really important bill, I think, that moved forward a few weeks ago. HR 4460 has a number of provisions we were able to negotiate in there, including this concept that we need to lean forward. We've got to stop this reactive approach and be proactive. I think it's going to save money. It's the fiscally responsible thing to do. And of course, if we can make our communities safer, more resilient, more protected from flooding and hurricanes, then that's a wise investment for the state, for the nation. So it again begins shifting that paradigm. Something that's more relevant perhaps to the Baton Rouge, the capital region, is this duplication of benefits issue that's come up. We've eliminated that in the bill that we passed. We have put additional dollars into grants that allow for protection, that allow for restoration type activities. We actually reduce the state's cost share on disasters when they step forward and are proactive and make investments to ensure their community's safety in the event of disasters. So really just a lot of important provisions in this bill that are going to help us to be more proactive and help to save federal dollars in the long term, but really, just make some of these hurricanes and other things, hopefully, another rainy day rather than these catastrophic disasters to our families, businesses, and economy in South Louisiana. So I'm excited about that moving forward. We're also working on another energy bill, and we're trying to improve upon the provisions of GOMESA, the energy revenue sharing, to where Louisiana would get additional dollars, not cut. So we're working on provisions there to address that. We have legislation that would extend the boundaries of the state of Louisiana to put them at parity with Texas and Florida to our east and west. Most people don't realize this, but the states of Texas and Florida have 3 marine leagues of state waters, which is roughly 9 or 10 miles. The states of Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana only have 3 miles, or roughly 1/3. And so if we can extend those state boundaries out, it would give us the revenue from energy production and other activities in those areas. So we have a number of irons in the fire right now. Some of them moving faster than others, but I think we're moving in the right direction. And again, education of these other members of Congress and helping them understand that this isn't a parochial issue. National implications to their constituents, to their states, and we've got to make sure we keep doing that.
Garret, can't thank you enough. Congressman from the 6th District here in Louisiana, the capital region. Thank you for everything you do. And Stephen, any last comments that we have before we let Congressman go? I know he's got to get to a vote.
Yeah, they hadn't called it yet. I keep watching. They
right.
About 6 minutes ago.
Yeah, so here's one I think, again, I think this is really fascinating. Mark Rainwater. I posted it up. It's up on the screen right now. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he's questioning the concept of actually manipulating the river. He says the hubris of man. We say river go here, go there. not here is the reason the marsh is vanishing. And basically he's saying, look, if you, and I'm just paraphrasing, but if you manipulate the river, then basically what you're going to do is you're going to affect commerce along Baton Rouge and New Orleans, probably dry up, is what he says, which begs the question, you want coastal restoration or commerce?
Yeah, and Mr. Rainwater brings up a good point, and because let's keep in mind, when levees were built on the river, it was designed to address flood protection. It ended up destroying our environment, our coast in Louisiana, and actually, in my opinion, that effort to provide flood protection has now actually threatened our flood vulnerability, or created greater flood vulnerability because of the loss of our coast. But Mark, here's the thing. In the development of our 2012 coastal plan, and the development of the 2017 update to the coastal plan that's been done under the current state administration, experts from the maritime industry have been brought into the room to help write this thing, to ensure that the right expertise is in the table. At the table. The maritime industry and our navigation and ports is very important. Our energy production, our commercial, recreational, charter, seafood industries are all really important. And of course, the people who live and work in South Louisiana are really important. So there was an extensive group of state, national, and international experts at the table to provide input. So these diversions, Mark is exactly right. If we just cut a hole in the levee and let the river flow, we will see drastic changes. It will potentially drive some of our navigation channels. In fact, there was an article, I think, in the newspaper, New Orleans newspaper, just yesterday that talks about the old river control structure and some of the threats there and what that would potentially cause Louisiana. But Mark, let me clarify. These diversions or river reconnection projects, or all of them, every single one of them, is designed to have a control structure. Similar to how the Bonacari spillway, similar to how the Davis Pond diversion, similar to how the Carnarvon diversion are constructed today, where you can effectively cut off all water or any diversion of water out of the Mississippi River. You would only turn those diversions on or open them up when you had sufficient flow in the river. That would all be included as part of an operations manual. And so times when you have the spring high water is when you would flow these things to mimic the natural process that built the state of Louisiana, the natural process that used to occur prior to the levees being constructed. So the sensitivity to the maritime industry, sensitivity to the importance of the Mississippi River system to jobs, economy in Louisiana is absolutely taken into consideration. And we would not have a scenario where all diversions would be opened up and you'd be walking across the Mississippi River because there wouldn't be water.
And it really is all about that system. It's about the multiple lines of defense. It's about not just diversions, but it's about all the things that we're doing across the coast from here, all the time.
Absolutely, and I'm trying to think of some names that we had involved. I know that Sean Duffy from Big River Coalition has been very helpful in providing input. You had a number of riverboat pilots that were at the table. Some of the barge companies were at the table. So a lot of folks with maritime expertise were at the table working with us and providing input and ensuring that we didn't screw things up. So,
Garret, again, Congressman 6th District from Baton Rouge, Garret Graves, thank you so much for being with us. Appreciate all the hard work that you and your staff are doing up there for Louisiana and for us. And we just appreciate what you guys are doing up there.
Right. Thank you, Jimmy, Stephen. I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to doing this again at some point.
Absolutely.
Okay, guys, listen, thank you so much. Congressman, please stay on for a second. I'm going to hit some buttons and close it out. To the public, please, if you have any questions, go ahead and post it. We'll try to get those questions and comments to the Congressman's office. Also, this is playing live right now on my website, BayouBuzz.com. We will be posting segments of this, I think, terrific interview. And so along with the transcript, so be able to actually see, watch, read the content. Just go to Bayou Buzz. You can sign up for the newsletter. Let me thank Jimmy Frederick, Communications Director of the Coalition to Restore Coastal Louisiana. And, we must certainly thank the another organization, which is to restore the Louisiana Mississippi River Delta, who really has helped out tremendously. So, guys, if you don't mind, again, just hold on for 1 second. I'm just going to press a couple of buttons,